to our final part of our make along pattern and our full mystery reveal. This week will be all about putting that cherry on top and finishing off our design. So this week we're going to be adding our necklines, and there's two different options, showing you how to add the embroidery element on the front and how to complete your jumper by joining it all together. So first up, we're going to join our shoulders and add our necklines. So you want to grab your body panels, your yarn and your tools and come and work along with me. So to start off part 7, I'm going to be first joining my shoulders and working my neckline. And I like to join my shoulders and work my neckline first to work out all the yarn I'm using for my main jumper. And then I'm left with all my odds and ends, which I can use for my embellishment. So to start off, I'm going to join my shoulder seams at the top. And I'm going to do this by using mattress stitch. And I can use some stitch markers to just hold my seams together. So I'm just taking a couple of markers, just laying my seams out, and your shoulder seams should match up. And when I'm sewing mattress stitch, I'm working on the right side. So I've got my work laid out. This is my front and this is my back. I'm obviously working on half panels. You will have a full sweater. And I'm going to join my seam. And I'm going to go through mattress stitch again. Although we've done it on the cuffs, I'm going to show it in a little bit more detail. And I'm going to show it in a contrasting colour. So I'm going to be using my blue and I'm taking a nice long length. But I would say for your shoulder seam, if you've got enough orange left, to use your orange. And I'm just using a single strand and taking one of my tapestry needles. And I'm going to thread up my needle. And I'm going to place a knot at the end. And I like to give myself a little bit of end that I can then tuck in to just make sure it's really secure. So I tie a double knot. And I'm going to start from the outside edge and work in. So to start off, I'm going to come from the wrong side, the edge, and then out through the stitch, pulling through. And then I'm just going to go over the top of the same stitch on the opposite side. And just first join them together at the edge, doing a whip stitch over the top of both sides to connect them before I start working in my mattress stitch. And in mine, as I'm using the blue, you can see this, but if you were using your orange, it would blend right in. And now I'm going to start my mattress stitch. So I'm coming over. So I'm coming on this side under the stitch, because we're also working now our mattress stitch, but with our stitches on their side. So I'm working under both loops of the V on one side, and then I'm coming over to the other side and going through the same both loops of the V across, and then I'm coming back across, going under the next stitch. So I'm going under the sides of the stitch and then coming back across and working the same on the opposite side. And as I'm working mattress, I'm not going to pull tight at first. And then I'm going to come back over under the side of the stitch, across, And unlike our cuff, because this is a longer seam, I'm not going to do my mattress stitch and pull it all in one go. I'm going to work a small section going under my stitches, working my open mattress stitch. And then when I've done between 5 and 10 centimeters, not more, I'm going to then close this little section. So you can see my stitches open. I'm going to pinch where I joined and then take my yarn and pull. And you'll see it will then make an invisible join. Even though I've worked in a different colour, you can't see my join. And so once I've pulled that little section, I'll just give it a little tug that I haven't pulled it too stiff and tight. And then I'll continue working my mattress stitch back and forth for another section before I pull my stitch tight again. So just you're working under the sides of your stitches, zigzagging back and forth across each side. And then once you've worked on a little section, you're then going to pinch where it last closed up, hold it so you're not pulling too tight where you've already closed, pinch the seam and pull gently your yarn that will close up your join. Give it a stretch that it's not too tight. And it just gives us a really lovely seam. We're also going to be using mattress stitch to join the sides of our work. And this is a great stitch for joining your work, especially when you've done stripes and you're using different colours. As you can see, I'm working in a really bold, different colour from my orange, but actually once I pull my seam tight, you can't see it. So it's really great when you're having to join your seams in one colour and you're working across lots of different colours. So I'm now just going to continue this, working all the way along my seam until I get to my centre neck. So I'm going to take out my stitch marker, and you can just use your stitch markers to hold your seams together whilst you're sewing them. I'm taking my stitch marker out and just working up until the last stitch closest to the neck, pinch and pull to close up that join, and then give that seam a little bit of a tug, a bit of a stretch, because you don't want it to feel too tough. Your mattress stitch join will feel quite secure, but you want to just make sure that you haven't ruched in your seam. And this is how it will look on the inside. It's really lovely and neat. And then I'm just going to finish off by weaving back along that seam to secure my yarn before I fasten it off. So just weaving through the stitches of the seam. And then I like to go in one direction and then just turn back on myself to just make a nice, secure weaving in of my yarn. And then I'm ready to take my scissors and snip. And there you can see I've joined my shoulder seam with my mattress stitch, and you're going to want to repeat that on the other side of your jumper. So now we've joined them and we've got our front and back panel joined, and we're ready to work on our neck. And I'm going to be showing you the neckline on my 2 half pieces, but you will be working circular in the round, as you'll have a complete oval here for your neck. You will have a joined piece. So to start our neck, we're going to be working on our smaller needle, so smaller in our length of our circular needle and smaller in the width of our circular needle. So I'm working in my 4.5mm, the same that I used for the rib for my cuffs. And I'm going to be picking up the stitches that I've placed on my yarn stitch holders of my neck. So I want to take my needle and I'm coming through, placing my stitches without twisting them, so as if I were purling them onto my needle. And I'm starting them on my needle from my center back. So you just want to slip your stitches onto your needle, both from the back where you've held them. Make sure you get them all. And then you're going to miss these because we'll be picking them up in the next round. So you're going to miss over your shoulder and the shaping, and then continue and pick up the stitches from your front, slipping them onto your needle, making sure you're getting both strands of your yarn. And I like to place them all on before I take out that yarn stitch holder. So I'm placing my stitches from the front on and the back. And when you're working on your piece, you'll want to continue across the whole of your front, back over your opposite shoulder, and continue round the other side until you get back to your center back. And so you've got them all on your needle. So again, you're starting at the center back, slipping your stitches on, missing your shoulder and shaping, going across the front, across the whole front, over your other shoulder, and then finish off by going over the last stitches up until you get back to your centre back. And then you can pull out your yarn stitch holders. And if your knot won't untie, you can just snip that and pull through. And now we're ready to work on our first round and picking up our other stitches. This is where you also want to decide the colour of your neck. So we'll be using any odds and ends we have left over from our kit. So if you've got enough, you might want to work on a plain neck, or you might want to make a multicoloured neck. And we're going to be working in rib, but before we do that, we're just going to pick up our stitches. But I'm going to start with my first colour because I'm going to be showing you making a multicoloured striped neck. And I'm going to be working with 3 colours. Our neckline also comes in 2 options. So we have a longer funnel neck or a folded back neckline. But we don't fold it back until the end. So all the process will be the same until the very last step. So I'm going to take my first colour and I'm going to work in my blue mix. And you want to work from the centre back. So for me, that's at the edge because I'm showing you on 2 half panels. But you will have a complete neck of stitches and you want to start from your centre back point. And we're going to join in our colour and we're just knitting the first round because we're knitting and picking up our stitches to start. So you want to take your needle and we're working in knit. So we want to join in your first colour. And again, because we're knitting and we're joining in, we can also twist in your ends as you go. Because my piece ended on my centre back, I've got 2 ends, but you will only have your the colour end that you're joining in to twist in. And you're going to knit across from the centre back to the edge of your back neck. So all the stitches from that centre that you've got for the back across. And just remember, for this first round, we're not working our rib yet. We're just working on knitting the stitches we transferred and then picking up our stitches. So once you've knitted from your centre back all the stitches that you picked up from that point until your neck shaping starts, and we've knitted halfway across, we now have a gap before our stitches come back on the front. So we've got our shaping over our shoulder and then our shaping to the start of our neck. And we now want to pick up stitches and add them to our needle. And how many stitches you pick up will be dependent on the size of the piece that you're making. So if you're working on a size 1, like me, you're going to pick up 12 stitches across this space. If you're working on a size 2 or a size 3, you're going to be picking up 13 stitches across this space. And you want to space them evenly. So sometimes at the start, this is a little bit of trial and error to pick them up and spread them out. But I want to pick up 12 as I'm working to a size 1. And it's good to remember that you've got more space from your shoulder seam to your front neck than you have from your shoulder seam to the back neck. So you want more stitches on the side where you're going from your shoulder seam to your neck than you want from the neck to the back. So don't evenly split them in half and do half on the front and half on the back, because it's not evenly weighted. And so to pick up your stitches, I've got my needle and I'm holding my yarn, and I'm coming in and I'm going one stitch in from the edge, and I'm coming in and I'm wrapping the yarn around my needle and then lifting and pulling through. And so I've added it to my needle. And what you can also do, so you remember how many you're picking up, is before you pick any stitches up, you can place a marker on your needle that marks the beginning of where you're picking up stitches. So when you're adding them to your needle, it's easy to see how many you've added. So I'm just going in and picking up. I've picked up 3, coming in, wrapping around, pulling that through, 4, 5. So I've worked 5 into my shoulder seam, so 5 across the back. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And you can see here, I've picked up 12 across, but I've still got a really large gap here, so I haven't spread them out enough. So I'm going to take off the stitches I've added into my shoulder seam and have another go at picking up my stitches and spreading them out slightly more on my front. So I'm going, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And now I've spread them out a little bit more and I'm reaching my front needle. So I'm now ready to pick up my front stitches. So you can just count, I've got my 12, I've placed them evenly, and now I'm ready to work those front stitches. So I'm just going to remove that marker I've still got on the front. And now I'm going to knit across my front stitches that have been picked up already onto my needle. So you're going to just knit every stitch, work your way across that front. And obviously on my sample, it ends here as I'm only working a half piece. But you will continue, so you'll knit across all the stitches that you've already added to your needle on the front, and then you will get back to the opposite side where you'll need to pick up the stitches on your opposite side, so the shaping of your neck over the shoulder. So you want to pick up the stitches in the same way, and then once you get to the edge, you want to knit the remaining stitches on the second half of the back until you work your way up into the center back. And then you will have added all the stitches to your needle. So at this point, once you've worked the stitches from the centre back over, added your stitches over the shoulder and the neckline shaping, knitted across the front, added the stitches from your second shoulder and neckline shaping, and knitted across the back neck to get back to the centre back, you will have 80 stitches if you're working on a size 1, 86 stitches if you're working on a size 2, and 94 stitches if you're working on a size 3 at this point. So you now want to place a stitch marker so you can know where your rounds are beginning and ending. So much like when we were working our sleeves, place a stitch marker on your needle, and we're now going to join our rounds. So to join our round, we're just going to be continuing. So we're going to be knitting our rib for our neck in a spiral. And we're working a 1 by 1 rib, just like our cuffs. And we then want to be traveling our stitch marker up with us each round. So it's on there telling us where we're starting and where we're going. So to work our rib, just going to place my yarn to the right side. To work our rib, we're going to be knitting 1 stitch and then purling 1 stitch, knitting 1 stitch and purling 1 stitch. And you're going to be working that all the way around. So I'm just going to close up my work to start this off to show you, but obviously you will have more stitches than me on your needle and you won't have to pull it so much, as your neck should fill your needle. So shuffle your stitches along if you need to, but yours should fill your needle. And we're going to join where we've added all our stitches on in the straight to then make it a round. So I'm going to knit 1 stitch and then purl the next stitch. And just remember with our knit and purl that we have to take our yarn through our needles to the right working side, so we're not adding any more stitches. So I'm working my 1 by 1 rib, so I'm working 1 knit, 1 purl. And because we've got an even amount of stitches on our needle, you'll just be working in a spiral, continuing working 1 knit, 1 purl to create your rib. And for our necks, after we've added our stitches on, we want to work a further 20 rounds of our rib. So I'm now working my first round of rib and we want 20. So if you're working in multiple colours, you can also decide what your colour mix might be. So I'm going to be working a striped rib. So I want to be working 8 rounds of my blue mix for my rib. Then I'm going to choose to work 4 rounds of my mint mix. And then I'm going to work 8 rounds of my lilac mix. But you can mix and match and work your neck rib in any kind of colour order you wish. But this is a great way to use up your odds and ends. So you might not have enough yarn to make a solid neck, but you can mix and match and use all your colours and make it individual to you. So you want to keep working on your rib, working a spiral. So when you get to the end of the round, just remember to transfer your marker over. So for your 1x1 rib, so working 1 knit, 1 purl, you want to create for your neck 20 rounds of rib stitch. So that doesn't include your first round where we picked up the stitches. We're counting our ribs from when we're knitting our 1 knit, 1 purl rounds. So you want to decide if you've got 20 rounds, if you want a solid colour, if you've got enough of one colour left, or if you want to make a striped neck. I'm going to be working on a striped neck, so I'm going to work 8 rounds in my blue mix. Then I'm going to do 4 rounds in my mint mix and then 8 rounds in my lilac mix to use up my odds and ends nicely. But you can do whatever colour mix that you wish with whatever you have left. And we're going to be working in rounds and transferring your marker across when you get to the end to help you count your rounds. And remember, because we're working in our 1x1 rib, our stitches should line up nicely so we'll get the nice ribbed effect. And you can count the little V's. If you haven't kept a note of how many rounds you're doing, you can count your stitches to keep note of the length of your neck. So you want to keep working around, and then I'm going to show you the 2 different ways that we can fasten off to create our 2 different styles of neck. Once you've worked your 20 rounds of rib, mine is shown flat for my sample, but yours will be in rounds. We then want to decide on our necklines. So we have a choice of 2 styles. We can cast off our neck at this point, casting off knit, purl, to create our funnel neck and making sure it's not too tight to get a nice stretch. Or we can fold our neck to create a thicker, more rounded neckline. So a rolled over and folded neckline. So I'm first going to show you how to cast off and keep the funnel neck. And then I'll also show you how we cast off and finish to make our folded over round neck. So to cast off your neck, we're going to work a cast off using knit, purl, and making sure that we're also not working too tight so we keep enough stretch so we can get it over our heads. So a knit purl cast off looks like this. You want to knit 1 stitch where you've got a knit stitch, and then purl your stitch where you've got your purl stitch of your rib. And then you're going to pull the first stitch over that second stitch. And then I'm going to change to knit. And then I'm going to pull that first stitch over that second stitch. So the action of casting off is the same, but just make sure you're purling in line with your purl stitches and knitting in line with your knit stitches, and that you're not pulling very tightly when you're working your way around your neck. So just working that cast off nice and evenly, so we're not making our neckline too tight. And you'll see, if I show you, I pull it out so you can see, that when we're casting off knit, purl, our neckline will just follow a little bit more the zigzag of our rib than if we were doing it all knitwise. And again, we just want a little bit of stretch there so you're not pulling your cast off too tight. So if you want the funnel neck, you're going to cast off all the way around, and then because yours is in a round, not a row, when you get to the last stitch, you're just going to pull it big and pull it through, and then just stitch it in the top and sew in your ends. And that completes your funnel neck neckline. I'm now going to show us the alternative where we do our rolled round neck. So where we fold in our rib to create our nice thicker round neck. So to work on our round neck, we don't want to cast off first. We're going to stitch in the neck and trap the stitches because we want that stretch at the neckline. If we cast off and then folded our neck in, it would be really tight around our neckline. So you want to turn your piece so you're looking at the inside, and so yours will be the whole complete piece. And I've got my ends from my colour change so I can trap them in. So I can just fold them in. And I've got my ends where I first wound them in for my neck that I'm going to snip. And so to work my stitched in neckline, I'm going to fold this in and take the stitches off one by one and sew them in. So I'm going to take a nice length before I cut my last yarn from my rib. So take a nice long length because we'll use this to stitch in our neckline. It's better to snip too much than too little. And I'm going to thread this on to my needle. And so how I'm going to work this is I'm going to catch the back of the stitch where I started my neckline. So it's a little bit harder when you first start because I've woven in my ends, but I'm taking the back of the stitch, the back loop of the stitch, and then I'm taking that from my neck, my first round, and then I'm coming and I'm going through the stitch on my needle and taking that off and pulling that tight. And so then I'm coming back through the next stitch on my neck and the next stitch on my needle, and then I'm pulling it off the needle, and I'm going to work that through each back stitch bump from my neckline, taking the stitch from the needle, so going through the stitch, it's coming off the needle and pulling through. And I'm just working my way across through each stitch of the neckline and each stitch on my needle to create my rolled round neck. So you can see it just creates a really nice finished round neckline. And you want to do that until you've worked every stitch of your neckline and every stitch off your needle. And then you can fasten off by sewing in your end and securing. And then you will have created your round neck with your folded rib. So when you've completed sewing in your neck, here I can show you on a sample, you just get a really nice stretch because you've sewn it and we haven't cast off. We've just trapped the stitches with our sewing them through the bump. And you can see it's really nice on the front. We've got a lot of stretch and it just creates a really nice neckline. Next up, once we have our necks, it's all about adding our customization. Now this can be added last, but it's a lot easier when you can work on your panels flat before we've joined the side of our bodies. And this is a great way to use up the odds and ends of your yarn. So once you've worked on whatever neckline is best for you, either the funnel or our round neck, it's now time to add some embroidery embellishment if you want. And I think it's best to add this just when we've got our shoulders joined but not the size of our jumpers, because it means that we can work on them open and flat. We're not working on a jumper that's already been joined. So you could add your embellishment at the end, but I think this is a great step after working our neck and having our side seams open. So we can now start on our embroidery embellishment and turn that last part of our sweater, our large lilac stripe, into something special and unique just for you. On this example, I went with a one colour and ho 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 for a bit of a Christmassy vibe, but you can use the alphabet and the planning sheet to make your design perfect and individual for you. So on our sweaters, it's really nice and easy to work our embellishment when our sides aren't connected. And I'm going to show you working in my front stripe, but you can embellish on both sides if you want. And this is a perfect way to use up the odds and ends from your yarn kit. So whatever colours you've got left, you can use in your embroidery embellishment. And I'm now going to show you how you can plan out your piece. So in your pattern, we've got an alphabet, which is done with arrows, which will help you when working your stitching. And we've also got 2 pages which have got this light grid on, and I'm going to show you how we cut this up and join it together, and this will help us plan our embellishment. And so you can plan it out to make sure it will fit in your piece before you start stitching. So you just want to grab some scissors and cut out our grid. So you can cut along the edge. And once you've cut all your pieces out, just use some tape. I'm just going to put it on the back and then line them up. So the stitches, the stitch count is across the top. So we can line up our pieces. Just cut that extra tape off or fold in. And now I've got a nice long strip where I can plan out my design. So this strip length is for the full size of a size 3. So it's got the full stitch count for a size 3. So if you're working on a smaller size, you can see there's this middle area that's greyed, then there's white, then it's greyed. So the middle grey area, taking off the 2 sections on the top and the bottom, that is our size 1. Then where we go out to the white, that is our size 2. And then to the end is our size 3. So if you're working on a smaller size, you can also cut down your piece. And in the center, there's a whited out stitch mark, and that marks your center, so your front center. And this will just help you plan out your embellishment. You can go straight onto your piece, but if you want to plan it out, this is what will help you guide you in your pattern. So you can then use your alphabet and follow it to plan out your own personalization. My recommendation when you're planning out your design is work from the center outwards. And you might want to write something, or you might want to use the symbols, but work from the center outwards. And also remember, because we're working with a straight drop sleeve, Don't plan your piece right to the edge, because you'll find that this will get sort of eaten up when you're wearing your jumper. It will get folded and you won't be able to see it. So leave yourself a nice gap before the edge. So try and work from the center outwards to plan your design. Also, I would suggest leaving at least 2 spaces between each letter when you're working a word or a pattern. But if you're spreading, if you've got more than one word, I would leave 4 to 6 spaces to create enough gap between them. So you can use this to help plan your design. And in our alphabet, the letters are shown, or the symbols are shown with little arrows. And this will help direct your stitching when we're working our chain stitch. So you can use this still as a guide when you're stitching on your piece, but you might just want to use this as a guide to start blocking out your design. So if you have your center point, so this is my center line here, I'm going to mark it so I can see it more clearly. And then I'm working it out. So if I'm going to show you how to do a heart, I can count here that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 stitches wide, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 stitches high. So then if I'm planning this on my piece and I'm working across, I might want to put my heart directly in the center of my jumper. So I know it's 11 stitches. And here in my section, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 stitches. So I'm going to then mark my center point of my stripe. So I want to count up 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm just going to mark that as my center point. And I'm going to use this as a guide to start planning out my heart. So I'm going to count 5 stitches down from my center point and 4 stitches up from my heart. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to mark that as the base of my heart. And then 4 up, 1, 2, 3, 4. Mark that as the top. And it's really good to plan it out because you can work out if you've done your maths wrong. So as it's 11, I want 6 and 5, not 5 and 4. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for my top and bottom point. And now I'm going to start that again. So it's much easier to make your mistakes in pencil than in thread. So from my heart, I've got in my diagonal line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I've got 2 up, 1, 2. 1 across, and then 1, 2, and then 1 down. And then the same on the other side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So I've planned out to have my heart in the middle, and I just want to have symbols for mine. So I'm then going to leave a space of 4 at least. 1, 2, 3, 4. See how that feels. Actually, I might go 6. Mark 6, and then I'm going to start tracing out my star next. So you can just use this and print it off as many times if you're planning different embellishments. And it's really good to help work out your spacing and get an idea what your embellishment is going to look like. And then we can use this when we start stitching our chain stitch. So plan out your embellishment and then grab your odds and ends and your tapestry needle, and I'm going to show you how we do our chain stitch. So we transfer this onto our jumpers. So I've decided to go with a double heart design, and I'm just going to explain on the alphabet and your symbols, there's different arrows in different colours, and these will help your stitching. So for my heart, we can see that half the arrows are in black and then half the arrows are in red. And that means I'm going to first stitch from my base of my heart up, around and down and finish off. And then I'm going to take the yarn and I'm going to then stitch from the back up and around to get the shaping of my heart. So I'm now going to show you how we do that on our piece. So this is my front and the right side. And what is great is we can now lay it flat whilst we're planning out and working our embroidery. So I'm taking my plan and I'm working on my half front sample. So I know my center front is where my swatch ends. But what you want to do is find your center front on your piece. So use your stitch marker and come across, count across, and place your stitch marker in your center front to mark that on your piece when you're starting your work, because then we can count out from the center to start our embroidery. So for me, if I'm starting on my second heart, because that will be the best one for me to show you, I'm just going to count how many stitches out from the center it is. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 stitches out from my center front. And so I'm going to count that on my piece. So I'm going to count out my 18 stitches, and actually our raised colour change detail really helps because this is higher contrast and it's easier to count our stitches along. So I'm starting from my centre stitch, which for mine is my edge stitch, but you can go down from your centre stitch. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Can take a stitch marker just to mark that, and then I'm just going to work out how many stitches I need to come up. So I'm missing the white box on my grid because that's not for the right size amount of rows for my piece. So I'm starting from my grayed out area, which is following for my size 1, and I've got 1, 2, 3, and I start on the 4th stitch. So then from my stitch marker, I can count up my lilac stitches, 1, 2, 3, and place it on my 4th, just to know where I'm going to begin my heart. And now I'm ready to grab my tapestry needle and some of my scrap yarn, and I'm going to be using red, and I just want to take a nice long length because I'm also going to be doubling up my yarn for a nice bolder design. So I'm going to snip and then I'm going to thread up. I'm going to fold my yarn in half and then thread it through, and I'm going to tie a knot at the end of my yarn. And I'm going to tie one more to make it nice and secure. And then I can begin working my chain stitch. So for your chain stitch, you can either do 1 stitch for every arrow, every stitch, every block, Or for a slightly bolder design, you can work over 2 at a time. And so to join in your yarn, I've tied my knot at the end, and I'm going to hold where I know I'm coming out. But on the back, I'm going to attach my yarn, and the best way I find is coming through the back of the stitch. So if you go to the back of the stitch, it won't show on the front. And what is great about having this double strand is then if I sew through the middle of the double strand, it then pulls and I've just attached my thread ready to go. So to work my chain stitch, I'm going to come out where my stitch marker is and pull through to the front. And I pulled my needle out, so I'm just going to re-put that on my needle. So pull through to the front, and then I'm going to take out my stitch marker because I now know where I'm starting. And you can use as many stitch markers to help guide you as you want. So as I'm in my center point, I'm now actually going to place my stitch marker where I want to reach to on the first stroke of my heart. So if I look at my guide, I've got from that first one, then 1, counting that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on the 6th stitch, I start my straight. So if I'm counting 1, and then the next stitch up, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this would be my 6th stitch here. So I can place my stitch marker in that stitch, and I now know I need to travel from this point to that point with my chain stitch. So to work your chain stitch, I'm then coming back in the same hole that I left. I'm coming across, up, so I'm facing this direction, taking my yarn, so I've gone through, wrapping around my needle and pulling through. And you just want to pull lightly so you get both threads. Pulling through. Then I'm going to go back in the same space, under, wrap around my needle and pull through to create our chain stitch. Back in the same space, under and up, around the needle and pull through. And just pull through gently when you're working with your double strand. So I'm coming in, under, wrapping around and pulling through. I'm going to work one more to my stitch marker, going through that loop and pulling through, and just make sure that you pull both parts of your loop through. So I've worked on my first diagonal of my heart. I now know that I want to go 1, 2, 3 stitches up. So this counts as my first stitch. And so that is in my first stitch. So it's 1, 2, 3. And as I'm doing a bigger stitch, that's my first stitch. And then going up 3, I'm in 1, 2, 3. I can actually do that all in one chain. For my height, and I'm now ready to start on my diagonal. So I'm going to take out my stitch marker. I know that from my sketch I'm going from that stitch 1, 2, so across I'm going 1, 2, so I can mark with my stitch marker where the top of my heart on the first bump will be. And so now I know I need to get to this stitch marker. So I'm just coming back in, up, and 2 stitches will do it. So my first one, pull through, and you can pinch to help pull through and not tug too tight. Then one more, come up, take out my stitch marker, and then I'm now going to mark the bottom point of my heart, and I know that's also in line with the straight, so I'm coming one stitch over, then one stitch down, then another stitch down, so one over, one down, and so my end point, just marking it with my needle before I put my stitch marker through, and I can rotate my work so I'm now coming across one stitch, following my chart before turning and coming down to my stitch marker. Once I get down to my stitch marker, this is where on my alphabet and symbol chart, it switches then to a red arrow, and that is because I want a nice point to my heart. So I'm going to take my stitch marker out, and what that means is when I get to the end, I'm going to, instead of going back through the same stitch, I'm going to go over the other side and this finishes off this first section and gives me a nice point into the middle. So this is also how we'd finish off at the end, but I'm then actually going to come back out through the loop again. So I've come out through the loop. So this has trapped and pulled the loop down and kept it in place. And then I've come back out through the loop and I'm ready to work the second side of my heart. And so that little stitch just works as a holding stitch. So we get a nice point in the middle of our heart before we start the second side. So I'm going to work the same way. I'm going to count from my chart and then mark it with my stitch marker and continue sewing. And then I'm working back towards my point. And I think actually my yarn might run out. So I'm going to see how far I can go. So I'm working back towards my point, and actually on this stitch I'm going to come, it's already came out the eye of my needle, put it back in, come through, and actually I'm going to go leave that loop and just pull that end through to the other side loosely so you don't pull your work, because if I now pulled it would undo all my chain. And I'm going to top up my yarn, so I'm going to take another length of red, snip, thread up my needle, and then I want to, you can either join in the same way or you can attach your yarns at this point. So I'm going to just make sure that that loop doesn't pull. So I'm going to place a stitch marker in it just for safety, but I also want it to stay a little bit big. And I'm actually going to just double knot my two ends together. You can always fasten these off and sew them in both a bit neater if you're a neater worker. So I'm going to tie them together and then I'm ready to come out. Just make sure you've pulled both your strands through. I can take out my stitch marker and come through that loop and continue down, working towards the point of my heart to finish up this symbol and part of my embroidery. And then on your last stitch, we're coming through, and just like where we changed direction, we're going to fasten that off by coming in. So not going back into the loop where we've been doing our chain, but going over the edge and pulling it through to the other side. And so you can now see I've completed my heart symbol, and on the back, I'm just going to fasten off and secure my yarn by coming to the back of a couple of the stitches and then weaving back on myself to secure. So I like to sometimes sew through my yarn as it creates a sort of invisible knot. Then I can snip. And then with these ends, I can just pull them through. The same with my needle. So if they're a little bit short, what I like to do is weave my needle in first. So weave my needle in away, so with the eye towards the strand, and then I take the strand of yarn and I put it through the eye of the needle, and then I can just pull through. And as these were knotted already, I can just trim, but it just neatens up my thread. So again, where it's quite short, weave through the yarn with the needle without anything in the needle, and then when the eye is close to my thread, put my thread through and pull. And that's how you want to use planning and your symbol sheet to help you with your embroidery and embellishment. And just have a lot of fun making it personal to you. I can't wait to see your different customizations. Finally, let's add our sleeves and join our bodies to complete our jumpers. So once you've worked your embellishment, if you've decided to fill your lilac stripes, we're now on to one of the very final parts, and we're going to be joining up our sweaters. So we've got the body where we've already joined our neck and our shoulders. So our neck is all done, our shoulders are joined, and we're ready to join in our sleeves and attach the sides of our pieces together. So we're going to be joining using mattress stitch like we already did for joining our shoulder seams. So I'm just going to show you how we mark out and use our stitch markers to just hold in place our pieces ready for working our mattress stitch. So if you take your jumper body, you want to work with your wrong sides facing each other, so right sides out, because we can sew our mattress stitch on the front of our work. And we've got this little area here at the beginning from our first part, and that's because our jumpers just have a nice little slit at the end to just help them hang really lovely. And so then I'm going to use a stitch marker, and I'm working on a size 1. So from the bottom all the way up, I'm going to mark then where we're joining our side seams before our sleeves join. So for a size 1 and a size 3, you want to join all the way up from where we've got this nice, so on our part 1, we have step 1 and step 2. So we're going to start joining from the end of step 2 of part 1. So we can place a marker in there just to hold it in place. So we're joining all the way up until we get to the beginning of step 5 of part 3. So this is our part 3, and step 5 is our last section of part 3. So we want to join all the way up to the beginning. So we're going up until our pink mix changes to our red. So I'm using just a stitch marker to pinch those sections. And I like to use stitch markers just to hold my pieces in place whilst I stitch. So just match up some of your stripes, and you can use the stitch markers just to ease your piece. And then I'm going to turn, open out my jumper. And so then I'm ready to join my sides using mattress stitch. So I'm going to work mattress stitch all the way up until that stitch marker. So I'm starting after my little slit. I'm taking my tapestry needle. You can use any of your yarns, but you just want to use a single strand. You don't want to use the 2 strands. And just take yourself a nice long length, snip, thread up your needle, work a knot in the end. And so we're going to join in our yarn from the other side. So I'm just going to come through the back of a couple of stitches and pull through to join in my yarn. So I've attached my yarn at the back, and now I'm ready to join. So I'm just going to go through. So I'm just starting off my mattress stitch by working a whip stitch over both sides. I can take the stitch marker out, and now I'm ready to work up the sides. When working your mattress stitch, you can either work 1 stitch in or half a stitch. I'm going to work half a stitch in. So I'm coming in, under and up. So I'm going over 2 strands of my stitch on one side, pulling through, and then I'm coming in, under 2 strands on the other side and up. And I'm going to work my mattress stitch. So then I'm coming across, in, under 2 strands and up. Back in the space where I was, in, under 2 strands and up. Across in that same stitch space, under 2 strands. And up. In the same space, under 2 strands and up. Just zigzagging up your seam. In the same space, under 2 strands and up. And your stitch markers will just make sure that you're keeping pace, but you can also use the stripes of your sweater to just make sure that your jumper is not going out of line when you're joining it. And then once you've worked a little section, just like our shoulders, I'm going to pinch and then pull. And you can see that I've joined my sleeve and it's in line. And I'm going to continue that all the way up until I reach my underarm point with my final stitch marker. So you want to join your side seam all the way up to your stitch marker, and you can do that on both sides of your jumper. And then we're going to add in our sleeves. So I've now worked my mattress stitch all the way up to my stitch marker, which I can take out. And because I've had a long length, I've still got enough yarn to use to do my sleeve. So you can see I've joined my whole edge from the split in part 1, and I've joined all the way up, lining up my stripes until my underarm point for my size. And so now what I want to do is line up my sleeve. So you can find your underarm point on your sleeve, and you can use your stitch markers to just hold it in place. So I've got my underarm point and I'm using my stitch markers to clip that in place. And then fold your sleeve. And I'm going to line up where I fold it flat with my shoulder seam join. So I can clip it in place with my stitch marker. And I'm just going to use one more to evenly space. So I'm just going to pull it into place and hold with a stitch marker. And then I can continue on with my yarn, continuing my mattress stitch to join. If your yarn isn't long enough, you can fasten off on the inside and start with a new piece of yarn. And so now I'm going to just hold it in place at first by coming in that underarm point and my join, working one stitch over the top to hold, and then work my mattress stitch. So as my stitches are running this way, I can go under the last stitch, so 2 strands, and then come in and go under my stitches on my body piece in my mattress stitch. So just working evenly on both sides. And for my sleeve, I don't want it to pull, so I'm working my mattress stitch one stitch in on my sleeve head edge on my body. And so you just evenly want to space your stitching, because your stitches won't line up evenly with your rows. We're just easing it in using our mattress stitch. And remember, once you've joined a little section, you can pinch and then just pull to secure, give it a little stretch. We don't want it too tight. And I'm just going to continue that all the way round until I get to my opposite side underarm and then fasten off, completing the joining of all my sides. And I've worked all the way around. I'm going to pull. I'm at my underarm point, so then I'm going to come under the arm with my needle, reach inside and pull your yarn to the inside. And before I fasten off, I just like to give it a nice tug and make sure that my armhole hasn't pulled too tight. And so I've joined in my sleeve into my armhole in my mattress stitch. And what I would suggest is I've shown you in blue, so it was nice and bold to see. But because of the top of our sleeve, if you've got enough left over, I recommend using your orange yarn to join the side of your jumper and then your sleeve, as it's slightly lighter when you're joining up the side of your jumper. And then because the top of our sleeve is in orange, it will just make sure that even if this is pulled a little bit, that you won't see any of the yarn poking out because it will blend in being orange. So now I've joined my sleeve to my body. We're very nearly finished with our jumper. I'm just going to turn onto the inside, and obviously yours won't be half, so you'll just pull it the wrong way round. And you just want to secure any ends that haven't been wound in as we go. So you'll have a few ends left over, but we've wound in most of our ends as we've gone. So I'm just going to secure my yarn that I was using for mattress stitch at that underarm point. So I'm going through. And I'm just going to work down the seam of my body for a few centimetres, looping my yarn over to weave in enough to then secure. And then just weave back on myself. And so that yarn is now ready to snip. And I'm just going to sew in and fasten off any more of these loose odds and ends. And then I've completed all of the finishing of sewing of my jumper. So joining together, sewing in my ends. And now we have one final step to finish off our piece, which will be blocking. So for these jumpers, we want to wet block them. So you give them a nice cool wash by hand, and then you can use a towel to get out most of the moisture. So how we do that is we lay our wet piece on our towel, and then we roll the towel up, and that will take out most of the moisture of your make. And then we want to leave it to dry it flat. And this is where you can also pull your jumper to shape if you've got any wobbly bits and shape those bobbles. And hey presto, we have all the techniques to finish your après-ski Mal jumper. I hope you've really enjoyed this make along with me and Hobby, and you're super happy with your mystery reveal. Thank you so much for joining me on this bright and colourful crafty project. I can't wait to see your finished results. If you've been working along with the Make Along each week, remember we have a special competition for 5 lucky winners. Just make sure that you post your finished jumper on Instagram by the 17th of November and tag @après-ski Mal, Hobby Yarn and Katie Jones Knit to be in the running. The winners will be announced on the 18th of November. I really hope you enjoy finishing off your pieces, and I can't wait to see them.